Hi, it's Steve and Joe from Freshagenda, and Steve, this week we're taking 5 plus a little more.
Yeah, let's run through a few big things that we're seeing in the outlook, market developments, and your really good chart of the week.
Absolutely. So, Steve, global dairy directions went out to subscribers last week, and these are some of the big findings for August.
Yeah, I suppose it's an interesting time because we've seen a long period of time with no milk growth in the major exporters. Just as that's coming back into some growth, trade is falling and stalling. So that's an interesting setting. It doesn't mean we're going to see a rapid change in dynamics. I think we're still seeing a market that's reasonably well balanced, but the story across commodities is a varied one.
Absolutely. So in terms of EU milk, you know, a few people have said to us, well, milk growth's not growing as fast as demand, but this is the story. Yeah,
this is an important story because, sure, milk growth in Europe, and that's the big driver, it's the engine room of trends in the market, is pretty sluggish and will take off slowly. But then you've got to deduct the fall in drinking milk. So drinking milk sales in Europe, as they are in the US and as they will be here one day soon, are falling. And that leaves you with a greater volume of manufacturing milk that's processed. Sure. And processors tend to want to balance cheese production against demand. And that leaves you with a larger change in the ingredient volume that you're producing. So skim milk powder output, and because they're moving away from whole milk output, we're seeing we're expecting in the second half of this year a greater increase in the output of skim milk powder at a time when Europe is trying to quit stocks. So that's an interesting balance that's going on.
Yeah, and of course butter's still a bit volatile as demand sort of picks up a little bit at lower prices. But what about New Zealand?
So New Zealand, with a few small exceptions, the conditions appear to be reasonably normal.
Yeah.
We've shown some very wiggly lines there. We keep an eye on this pasture growth index, which combines a number of physical elements and attempts to put on a worm chart the barometer of pasture growth. So for both North and South Island, that's showing it's sitting in the middle, squarely in the middle. So conditions are rather normal. There are some, as I said, a slow start in the very south because it was so wet. And then in the north, there's some dry patches, but they don't appear to be predominant worries.
No, overall it looks pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah. So that's a developing story, and we'll know more as time unfolds.
And so what does it all mean for commodity values, Steve?
So in this little snapshot chart, which we use, so skim milk powder should continue to firm slowly as the world works through some stocks. Fat in Europe appears to have steadied, but there may be a little way to go in New Zealand, the Oceania values. So we saw, and we'll talk about the GDT result in that context. Cheese, pretty flat. Europe, if anything, is dramatically cheaper, but that should correct and it should rise.
Yes.
Whole milk powder, pretty steady. We're doing the usual
wait and see,
spring drift, whatever we call it, but Europe will come off as it comes down, and there's a bit of South American product coming along, which will help that along too. So
GDT this week, we've had another fairly flat result.
Yeah, but a lot going on. Right. So whole milk drifted weaker with the expectation that we're going to see reasonable volumes around, and a little decline in participation, as I mentioned on the left-hand side there, from Southeast Asian buyers.
Yeah, although China came back in.
China came back strongly. Yeah, and they're working this system pretty well.
Yeah.
Skim milk powder, as expected, a little firmer, though that came against an interesting backdrop because both the US and Europe prices drifted leading up to this event.
Yeah.
And we also saw, fats a bit mixed. Butter gained some traction in the short term, which is probably a good story because it needs to. We've seen trade fall off quite dramatically. We've seen prices tumble over a number of events. This time, it looks like it might have bottomed.
Yeah, not so good for AMF though.
Not so good. No, it's still overpriced, and there's still obviously more substitution risk with butter oil.
For sure.
With the weak veg oil prices out there, so
absolutely
pretty mixed all round. But again, there's a lot of detail there, and there's a lot of interest in what's happened.
Yeah, behind the scenes.
Jo, your chart of the week, and we've had a doozy out of Australia.
We have. We don't often talk about Australia, actually, but this week we thought we'd just highlight, we found some milk here, which is good because we've been fairly short for the 2018-19 season. We haven't seen any milk production stats for a while for Australia, but they've come out for the full 2018-19 season, and lo and behold, we've found about 220 million litres.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So what do you reckon happened?
I think we forgot a company.
Oh, that's embarrassing. So we're still well down.
Yes, but a little bit better than expected. And it was, unfortunately, in that very critical northern Victoria and southern New South Wales region, wasn't it, which we're all watching fairly closely because the drought and the shortages of irrigation water are really hitting hard there. So it's still not a happy story in Australia, still an outlook for a warm, dry spring ahead, and still pretty tough conditions, notwithstanding the fact that prices are pretty good.
Yeah, so that's we still think milk's going to keep falling, don't we?
Yeah,
we're still going to see this for most of this year.
It looks pretty hard, given the cows that we've lost out of the system, and given you know that while there are patchy areas of southern Australia that have had really good rain, a lot of these areas, like northern Victoria and southern New South Wales, are still doing it tough, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all from us. That's a wrap. We'll see you hopefully in the next week or so.